Good afternoon and welcome to the May 28th meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council. We are happy to have you here. Our first thing on the agenda is the invocation, and followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you will stand, Pastor David Beam of the Pinehurst United Methodist Church will give our invocation.
Will you pray with me? Loving God, we give you thanks for the beauty of this day and the beauty of this community we get to be part of. We pray that your Spirit would bless us now in this hour to come, that you would grant us wisdom and vision, and that you would bless our leaders, that they might move forward in faithful ways that build up our community so that it might be a community of love and justice for all people. We thank you, God, for this chance to gather here, and we pray that you would protect us and guide us. For we offer this prayer in your holy name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor Beam, we welcome you to stay, or if you have other things to do, please don't be shy about leaving. Okay, next we have reports, first from our manager.
I'd like to just highlight a couple of things. The first is that we did get the Library Needs Assessment RFP completed over the last couple of days. And as of earlier today, that was going out to a fairly wide audience, trying to reach as many consultants that might be interested in that type of work as possible. We sent it to the American Institute of Architects, the American Library Association, libraryconsultants.org, and in addition to some specially identified folks that the Library Working Group had come across in their contemplation of this problem over the last year or so. So we look forward to that getting out to everybody and getting a lot of quality submissions as a result. Brief update on the comp plan. We do have the draft, very, very rough draft in hand from our consultants. We got that on the 15th of May. Senior staff is reviewing that right now. I can tell you a whole host, hundreds of comments and edits that primarily Natalie has come up with so far. Jeff Batten and myself are working on it as well. And that'll go back on Friday to our consultants with all of our comments. And then the next big event, obviously, is the community open house, which will be scheduled for June 18th and 19th. So that's getting to the point where it's just around the corner. And that plan will be coming back to us to enable that community open house. So the updated plan will be coming back to us. And then there will be opportunity for the community at large to comment on the plan during the course of that open house, and our consultants will bring that back with them when they leave, and we'll have that dialogue about what it means for us in terms of what appropriate updates to the plan will result. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeff. Kevin?
A short blurb on the auto show that went on in the village on Sunday, a resounding success. And you measure success by asking the participants, and they were just enthralled being able to take over the village and park those antique cars everywhere. And it's kind of neat to have an event on Sunday when not a bunch going on and people get to enjoy the village. I hope you guys got to go, but it was a resounding success. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Kevin. Mr. Baldry?
There's a event coming up in November this year, which is our election. And I thought it was important for me to let everyone know and make an announcement as to what my intentions are. Certainly a lot of introspection has gone into this, but at the end of the day, what's best for me and what's good for me is I will not run for election. I will not seek a second term, either as a council member or otherwise. Certainly a difficult decision, but for me at this time, I think that is the best decision for me and also for my family. I know it's an honor and a privilege to serve the residents of the village, and certainly one of the great successes for me, I believe, is the ability that I have and have had when residents come on individual issues, whether it's stormwater runoff or road surfacing or working with the county on sewer and water or the state on roads, is to be able to respond to the needs of the residents and the citizens. And why is that important? Because it shows that local government, small government indeed can work. And that's not done just by me alone, but it includes our great staff that we have. So I look forward to completing my term. There's lots to be done. As Jeff mentioned, our long-range plan is about to be rolled out. It's important to understand what we need to do and what the library is looking to do, and to see if it's going to be we'll be able to finish that before the election occurs. I hope all of that can be done. Certainly the community center opening, I mean, there's some great things that have been done, but I think it's important right now so that to announce my intention, again, it is not to run, so that others who would like to run and would like to step up have the time to file in July, and then the race begins about Labor Day through Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boldry. Not exactly the news I wanted to hear, but what's best for you and your family, and I know I've made the same decision, what's best for me and my family. Just because we're not running for re-election, it doesn't mean that we're disappearing off the face of the earth. We will still be residents of Pinehurst and interested in what goes on, so that's for sure. Jack Farrell, you got any announcements to make?
No, I have nothing, and I'd be sad to see John not continue. He's put so much into
Agree.
this. It's
Agree.
obvious to everyone, and be a big loss. But I understand completely.
Yeah.
So all the best.
Okay, thank you, John. Judy?
I'll add my gratitude for John's service as well. Solid, steadfast, and always there, and on time, and with good ideas. So thank you so much for that. And I know that we'll count on both of you and Nancy being active citizens. Thank you very much to the staff for getting out the RFP for the library RFP, and look forward to getting in some respondents. And I attended yesterday at the Village Chapel a memorial service for Memorial Day. It was terrific, a very strong crowd there as well. So lots to be grateful for in this community and in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, our next item on the agenda is our consent agenda, and we just need a motion to consider all these items that are routine.
I move to approve all items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by John Boldry and a second by Jack Farrell. Is there any discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. That's unanimous. The next item is one that always baffles me, because many of you have heard that in another life I was an EMT, and we never saved anyone. I mean, in my short tenure, we never saved anyone. But these folks, I think maybe Carlton's going to come forward.
Carlton's going to come up, and I think everybody's aware that several years ago, I guess about three or four years ago, we took on our fire department and firefighters took on the added responsibility of doing emergency medical calls to back up the EMS, county EMS. And then every year, as a result, we have seen the terrific result that over the course of the year, a small number of lives have been saved in our area of southern Moore County directly as a result of their efforts. This year is no different. I think maybe more lives were saved this year than in previous years, if my memory serves me correctly. And you can see we got a whole host of folks in the back of the room there from the fire department that Carlton is going to recognize as a result.
Thank you. And I would like to say that there are several here at our on-duty crew that are not being recognized for life saves today, but in the last week, I've been with them on calls to see the dedication and professionalism that they've had on some very intense calls, and the teamwork that they're able to exhibit, and just how they handle the calls, that they always put the patient and the citizens first in dealing with that. So I just want to recognize those who are here tonight and thank them for everything that they do. We're recognized once a year by the county EMS system as a part of that for the lives we save through CPR and the administration of that. We had 4 incidents this year out of 14 throughout Moore County, and that's over 12 months. It runs from May to May. So I'm here to recognize several of our staff members for their success in saving a human life, and I'm very honored and humbled to be able to recognize their part in that. So I'd like to ask Jay Kramer if he would come up and accept our department's Certificate of Commendation and Life-Saving Ribbon Award for Call for Service 18-35805 that was performed on May 9th, 2008. And we're recognizing Captain Steve Cox, Master Firefighter Jay Kramer, Firefighter Bonnie McDonald for that call. If I could ask Battalion Chief Cox and Captain Luck to come forward. So, incident call for service 19-151-63 from February 26, 2019. We're recognizing firefighter Matt English, senior firefighter J.R. McLaughlin, who left employment with us, but we're still recognizing him, and Master Firefighter Michael Washington, and they were unable to be here today. Call for service 19-858 from March 15th, 2019, Battalion Chief Adam Coles, Captain Steve Cox, and Firefighter James Neal. And Battalion Chief Randy Cox will accept that on their behalf. And call for service 19-28-436 from April 15th, 2019 is recognizing Captain Chris King, Master Firefighter John Warren, and Master Firefighter Johnny Yarborough. And Deputy Chief Fritz is accepting on their behalf. Conflict. Okay, we ran into a scheduling conflict. We actually have some of those in training and some who are actually out of town on vacation with the holiday yesterday. So they send their apologies for not being here, but I am very honored to be able to recognize them.
Carlton, would you explain a little bit about how you get this award? It's not just you perform CPR.
The medical director for the EMS system has identified CPR saves as being, we perform CPR, they're admitted to Moore Regional Hospital, and they actually are discharged from the hospital. So there are times that as we perform CPR that a pulse is reestablished, but it's not successful, that they pass away. They don't come out of the hospital. So the criteria it's a slim window, and it's a very small percentage of the calls, but it is very humbling to know that you are involved in helping to save someone's life, and really my honor to recognize our staff.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Carlton. Thank you very much. Okay, I think there'll be a photo op in the back. Beth is going to take care of that. Maybe it'll just be Jay. In his spare time, Jay likes to climb trees, and he likes to cut down trees, and sometimes he forgets to send you a bill. He loves to do it so much, so. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have a motion to recess our regular meeting and enter into our public hearing. Need a motion to do that.
I move to recess the regular meeting and enter into a public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion by Kevin Drummond, a second by Judy Davis, to recess our regular meeting and enter into a public hearing. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll ask for your vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Thank you, that's unanimous, Beth. Jeff, I see you right at the ready, so this is all yours.
Is this working? Can you hear me?
No. Jason? Jason?
It's just not very loud. How about now?
A little better.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. I'll just try to speak up. So this is a public hearing. We do this every year, and this public hearing is required by the general statutes to give our public the opportunity to comment on the annual budget that the council is currently contemplating. So that's what this presentation is going to be about. I'm going to give everybody a quick synopsis of what's in this year's budget and plan. So what is included in our strategic operating plan is really three elements. The first is the 2020 general fund budget. It also includes a section on the community center capital projects fund. Okay? That's kind of a special deal. We started it last year when we started the construction of the community center, and that will close out this year. So in future years, you won't see that as part of the strategic operating plan. And then finally, there's a five-year financial forecast that we do to ensure that our plans going forward are financially healthy. The budget was developed to do two things. I'm going to start off with the two things listed there on top. The first is to achieve the council's vision, mission, goals, and objectives. And the second is to address strategic challenges and opportunities facing the community. And we arrived at those goals and objectives and an understanding of our challenges and opportunities through a process that began late last fall with a gathering of information and then rolling into our annual strategic retreat, where the council set our priorities going forward. And then the third thing I'll say is that this strategic operating plan is also written in a way to communicate the results of what we plan to do so that it complies with the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award requirement that we aspire to achieve every year. Touched on this a little bit just a second ago, but our annual strategic planning process begins each fall as staff gathers and analyzes key facts and data. In early December, the Village Council, senior staff, and key volunteers gather at our annual strategic retreat. And one of the most important things that comes out of that retreat is a designation by the Council of our focus areas for the upcoming plan. And for this year, this coming year, the focus areas that the Council set for us to focus on were to manage development and enforce codes and ordinances, provide interconnected pedestrian facilities, maintain high-quality streets, and provide recreational programs, facilities, and cultural events. This budget also includes 7 specific initiative action plans, some of which address those 4 focus areas. And the total cost in this year's budget for those 7 initiative action plans totals just over $319,000. Some highlights from this year's budget. You can see that the total budget amount is $21.6 million. That's a little bit less than last year. Last year was about 8% higher, and last year was 8% higher primarily because of the significant expenditure associated with the community center, that capital project. This proposed budget includes a property tax rate of 30 cents per $100 of valuation. And we arrived at that by taking what we typically calculate as the revenue neutral tax rate after the recent county revaluation occurred, and then correcting it for the overall inflation that has occurred since the last revaluation. In essence, you might think about this inflation-adjusted revenue-neutral tax rate as a tax rate that will give the village the same buying power with its property tax revenues that we had right after the last revaluation. The ending fund balance in this budget is 34.6%, which is right in the range of the 30 to 40% policy that our council has long maintained. However, there is a $1 million contingency fund inside our general fund that, if it is not spent, and we don't expect it to be spent, would result in an ending fund balance of 39.2%, so about 5% higher. But that is still within the 30 to 40% range that the council has set for our policy. As I said before, the budget includes 7 initiative action plans that require a total expenditure of $319,000, and this budget includes the addition of 4.5 full-time equivalents in our staff, our overall staff makeup. And that includes 4 new hires, full-time hires, those being an administrative assistant in our Parks and Recreation Department that is associated with the community center and has long been a part of the plan for the community center, a GIS analyst that will give us a new capability that we have not had previously, 1 more building inspector that would bring our total building inspector positions to 3, and 1 new firefighter. We also have a couple of partial FTE additions in this budget. The first is 0.3 of an FTE that's associated with replacing two seasonal part-time streets and grounds employees with 1 full-time employee. And then the second one is a 0.2 of an FTE increase associated with transitioning one of our current IT staff from part-time to full-time. Here you can see the significant capital expenditures that are in this proposed budget. And I'm going to take these a little bit out of order for convenience sake. The rescue vehicle, the solid waste truck, and the 3 police vehicles are normal scheduled replacements in our fleet. You can see we also have $225,000 earmarked for storm drainage projects, and this is associated with the ongoing concern that we have continued to hear over the last 2 particularly wet years from our community about the adequacy of our storm drainage system and situation across the village. Near the bottom, you can also see that we have $115,000 in this plan for Magnolia Road streetscape improvements, and this is a continuation of a methodology that we've had in place over many years now, where we have taken segments of our downtown area, the commercial part of our downtown area, and we have invested in brick sidewalks and landscaping enhancements to create a better atmosphere for our pedestrian community. In this case, that $115,000 currently is projected to be dedicated to Magnolia Road, and we're talking about the segment from McCaskill Hill down here at the bottom of McCaskill Road down at the bottom of the hill on up to Community Road near the Manor Inn. You can also see 2 $200,000 placeholders, I'll call them placeholders at this point, for land purchases. One is for a potential purchase of land associated with our 3rd and next fire station. As we continue to grow and as we analyze our ability to respond to our village residents and businesses, as well as those in our ETJ, we do recognize that we have some areas in our responsible limits where we struggle more than in other areas to meet our desired response times with our fire assets. And so this would be focused on that. In the coming year, we're going to be doing an evaluation or a study to try to figure out and zero in on the best geographic area for such a third fire station. There's no plan in the 5-year horizon to add that fire station, but we're just thoughtfully looking forward to a future requirement. Once that evaluation is done, then we will look for the right opportunity to buy the right piece of land when the opportunity comes available, so that we'll have the land when we need it to build that third fire station. Kind of a similar situation with the $200,000 that are earmarked to buy land for a future parking capability. I'll call it a capability rather than a structure. And this is done with the notion that we continue to hear concerns and complaints about the parking situation downtown. We know that a critical element of our upcoming comprehensive plan is going to be some recommendations for what to do with what we previously have called Village Place, as well as the Rattlesnake Corridor. And we know that future growth in those areas are going to continue to place demands on parking. And so what we're going to do is we're going to wait to see what the final recommendations are in our comprehensive plan. And then there's a project coming up this coming year as well to do that small area plan for the village core, the new core, Village Place, and the Rattlesnake Corridor. And as was the case for the fire station land, the idea here is to have the money available so that when we zero in on the right area for parking and the right opportunity becomes available, we're postured to make that strategic investment going forward. This is a look at how our budgeted revenues and expenditures break out. And this is very similar to what we see every year, but I think it's helpful to reinforce where our money comes from and how we allocate those resources in a typical budget, including this year. On the revenue side, you can see that just over half of our revenues are property tax revenues. And then the next biggest contributor is what we call intergovernmental revenues. That's a kind of a catch-all for a lot of different things, but the two main components of that are our local option sales tax and our Powell bill funding. And then on the budgeted expenditures, again, this is typical for the Village of Pinehurst, and I think most local governments. Just over half of our annual budgeted expenditures are associated with salaries and benefits. And then the lion's share of what's left is dedicated to other operating expenditures. And then about usually 9 to 10% is focused on capital. That's reinvestment in capital and new capital expenditures, with about 1% in this budget for our dwindling debt service, which, if we continue on pace, will be gone in a couple of years. This is another way to look at the way that we allocate resources in this year's budget. And you can see, and it should come as no surprise, that we spend the most money on public safety, also spend a fair amount of money on street maintenance, probably more as a percentage of our overall budget on street maintenance than many communities do. And then you can see that things like planning and development, debt service, and contingency funding represent the smallest appropriation or allocation within this budget. All right, so that was just a quick snapshot and overview. all of our strategic operating plan is available online. I hope folks that are interested have had the opportunity to review that document more fully, particularly the mayor's budget and brief and my letter that follows it up front in the strategic operating plan, because I think those two documents provide the most meat for folks to understand how we budget and what we're doing in this 2020 budget. So at this time, I'm going to conclude my briefing, and I'll take my seat back over there, and we can allow for anybody that has any comments or concerns or questions about the 2020 budget to raise them at this time.
While Jeff's coming back to his seat, do any council members have any questions? We we have had the budget for quite a while now, the plan, and we had one budget workshop, which was very successful, very concise, and want to thank Jeff and Brooke and your staff for that. It went very smoothly. And at this point, do any council members have questions for Jeff? Okay. No one has signed up for our public hearing. However, if anyone in the room would like to speak to our budget at this public hearing, we'd be happy to hear from you. Does anyone wish to speak? Okay. If not, then we can have a motion to recess the regular meeting and recess our public hearing and re-enter our regular meeting.
I move to adjourn the public hearing and re-enter the regular meeting.
Second.
We have a motion by Judy Davis and a second by John Baldry. Is there any discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, everyone. That is unanimous, Beth. Next, we have item 9. That will be Natalie? That will be Lauren, of course.
Members of the Village Council, I'm here to present the third quarter strategic operating plan for the fiscal year 2019, which ended on March 31st of 2019. As you all are aware, the Village Council adopts a strategic operating plan, which is what we were just discussing for the upcoming fiscal year. But this one we are talking about for FY 2019. And our strategic operating plan indicates the village's plan to achieve our vision and mission. We use a balanced scorecard approach to integrate strategic planning and resource allocation. The FY 2019 strategic operating plan now includes 9 initiative action plans, or IAPs as we call them, with 7 that are scheduled for this fiscal year. If you turn to page 3 of your report, you will see the color-coded overview of the IAPs and the metrics as of March 31st. At the end of the third quarter, 6 IAPs were in progress and on schedule. 1 was in progress and not on schedule, and I'll cover the details of all of those in just a moment. We also monitor metrics of our initiative action plans in order to track our effectiveness at accomplishing targeted results. And there are 2 IAP metrics that will be tracked in the future. But as of March 31st, the village achieved projected performance for 5 or 71% of the 7 IAPs with metrics in FY 2019. So at this point, I will go through each of the IAPs to give you a brief update on those projects. So the first IAP is our police department accreditation, and this is to implement accreditation standards for our law enforcement and achieve the law enforcement accreditation through CALEA. This IAP is in progress and on schedule at the end of Q3. And excuse me as my mouse is jumping, the metrics For this, we did achieve our goal. Let me stop here and point out for the council, we did change the view of these metrics to year-to-date metrics. In the past, we had looked at it more on a quarterly basis, looking at quarterly goals and quarterly performance, but we have changed that to year-to-date as of your request at the last quarterly update. Just to get a better picture as to where we're at with our achievement of those, looking at it for a full year. The next IEP is our long-range comprehensive plan update. I know you all are very aware of this IEP that is ongoing. And at the end of Q3, the project was on schedule. And of course, as we have mentioned, the draft plan was delivered to staff in Q4, and that is under review currently. The metrics for that we did achieve. We had a great number of participants over time that have participated in the comp plan. That includes participation online and in person at our events for the comprehensive plan. The next IEP, actually the next two IEPs are those that I had mentioned that are scheduled to begin in the future. As council is aware, and also for the public's knowledge too, these IEPs have been changed to a term we call projects. So it's taken off the IAP list and it is on a project list. We have budgeted for both of these within the strategic operating plan for future years. So they are on there at this point. The next IEP is the Recreation and Cultural Facilities IEP, and this is primarily for the construction of the new community center. And at the end of Q3, construction was progressing well and was on schedule for anticipated completion date of October 24th. Oops. You will see for the metrics of that IEP, we are falling a little bit short of our projected performance goal of 3,600 participants. We do anticipate some of that may be seasonal. Some may be due to some changes within program offerings that we've been able to have this year. But we anticipate at the end of Q4, those numbers will be going up due to seasonality. The next IEP is our Transparent Operations IEP, and this was to publish online performance dashboards to the village's website for greater transparency. This is our one IEP that at the end of Q3 was in progress but not on schedule. We have had time since Q3 ended, and they have now been implemented, so that IEP has been achieved at this point. But at the end of Q3, it was not on schedule. Due to challenges, we had some issues with compatibility with the internet platform we were using to display the dashboards that we had developed originally, kind of the first concept of it. And staff developed a new dashboard solution and was able to implement that now in Q4. We will begin tracking that so we can actually see the number of website hits that those dashboards get using Google Analytics. And so we are already tracking those at this point to see the success of that. The next IEP is our P&I, Planning and Inspections Process Improvements IEP. And this is to implement the software to process permits and inspections with an online portal and implement other recommendations that the Birdie team did recommend. And at the end of Q3, it was in progress and on schedule. As you all know, staff has been working very hard on this IEP with the plans for this to go live on July 1 with the new implementation date of July 1. We are not hitting the metrics for this, but we do anticipate that number will improve once this does get implemented here in the near future. And that is for the average number of days for issuing single-family permits for new construction and additions and alterations. The next IEP is our Baldrige Excellence Framework IEP, and this is to continue using the leading business model of the Baldrige Excellence Framework to ensure systematic processes that deliver exceptional results. And staff is continuing to document the village's approach to deployment, learning, and integration related to the senior leadership and the workforce categories at the end of Q3. We also began drafting the organizational profile at the end of Q3. And now in Q4, we have begun some senior leadership team meetings to go ahead and work on this IEP on a regular basis. At this time, at the end of Q3, we did not have any of the metrics that were planned for. They were planned for more of Q4. The Workforce Learning and Development IAP, we are continuing to assess workforce capabilities, succession planning, and the development of workforce skills and abilities through our TOPS training program and other external training. That was in Q3, we actually amended this IAP in order to develop a comprehensive learning and development system. We senior leaders met and we, using the Baldrige framework, developed our first learning and development system. So really looking at multi-processes that we have here at the Village and making sure that they are all integrated and aligned with each other, just to make sure that we are working efficiently and effectively while developing our workforce here. So we did begin that, and staff developed a new system with an implementation start date of April. And we are currently working on that. We did hit our metric for the vacancies, the percent of vacancies filled with internal candidates. That was met at the end of Q3. And this concludes my update for the FY 2019 Q3 Strategic Operating Plan update. Do you all have any questions for me?
Thank you, Lauren. Any questions for Lauren on the Q3 update?
So Lauren, you may need to defer to someone else for these, but the July 1st date for the planning and inspections software launch, is that really looking still solid at this point? Okay, great. And if you could just explain the carry forward comment under transparent operations.
Sure. Transparent operations was an IAP that was a previous IAP for, I guess an IAP for a previous fiscal year.
Okay.
That was not completed due to staff turnover and some other kind of pressing priorities at that time. And we had, I guess a portion of that IAP was the Financial Transparency Center that was published
Right.
on our website. I guess it's been 2 years ago now, probably.
At least, yeah.
Yep. And then this was kind of the second part of that IAP. So it was a carry forward IAP from a previous year that was getting completed. Good question.
Other questions for Lauren?
Yeah, I have one question. How do we determine whether our goal is the right goal? I mean, take average number of days to issue single-family permits, and the year-to-date goal is 8. Is 8 the right number? And how did we come about to 8? I mean,
Natalie, if you
it
wanna
should
talk
be
little
a
bit
goal that's related to something where we stretch ourselves. You don't have to get up, my goodness, with your leg.
I can kind of give a general overview, really, of our process for especially for that one, for example.
I use that as an example.
That's a metric that we track on our planning and our planning departmental dashboard. And each of our dashboards have KPIs associated, and our staff fills out a KPI worksheet that includes looking at historical measures, our historical performance, as well as what we project to perform at, while also looking at benchmark communities to know what the best practices are for that. That is one that we are able to benchmark against. Natalie, you probably have.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Jack, I mean, this is one when we were doing this Birdie study for the Planning and Inspections Department, and we benchmarked and looked at what other communities are doing in terms of their turnaround time, and it was significantly less than ours. And so we kind of targeted this as really the key reason for implementing the new software is in order to get those reviews completed in a little more timely fashion. So we indicated that we would be reducing that goal once the software was implemented and we got a good feel for what it took. So my anticipation is in next year's SOP, you'll see that goal go down significantly.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point that Natalie
That's
just
the
made. And we sometimes internal to staff trip over this as well. When we're looking at goals, it's okay for us to have a long-term goal, and then a shorter-term goal that recognizes the resources that have currently been allocated toward that problem set, if you will. And so this is a situation where our long-term goal would be better than this, but we aren't there yet with regard to the allocation of resources. So for setting our goal for this year, we did it such that we thought it was realistic given the resources available.
Okay. So there is a methodology, and it's a one where we strive to improve constantly, and it isn't a given. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, if not, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, next I think we have Brooke coming to the podium for the presentation of our quarterly financial statements.
Thank you. Yes, continuing with Lauren's presentation of the third quarter SOP update, we'll move into the third quarter financial statement update as well. As we enter into the last quarter of the fiscal year, and we're currently about midway through that now, but the village's financial condition remains strong. Our revenue forecast for the first 3 quarters of the year was very strong, right on target. Operating expenditures are running a bit below expected levels, which is very typical at this time in the year, and capital outlays are within budget as well. So this information that we devised here was part of the building blocks for the development of the FY 2020 budget, as well as the strategic operating plan. So this is kind of the starting point for some of that. In terms of the financial position, the general fund is showing $3 million in income for the first 9 months of the year. This is quite a bit higher than the $2.2 million the last year. Fund balance in the general fund is currently at 70% of budgeted expenditures, and that's a little higher than 67% last year. But I do want to point out that this will be reduced significantly with the remaining construction of the community center. As of March 31st, just to point out, we had spent approximately $687,000 of the total community center construction and design. But as of last week, just to take a quick update to see where we are now, we're right at $1.2 million spent. We anticipate a couple of pretty significant invoices coming in through June 30th, because as you can see, construction's moving right along and making great progress. Cash and investment balances increased by about $283,000 over last year. A few highlights from revenues and expenditures. Our general fund revenues were about $138,000 or 0.9% above quarterly projections, so right on target. Although this is the result of several offsetting increases and decreases in the various revenue sources. So the largest revenue that we have, property tax revenues, those are at about $208,000 above our quarterly projections. The real and personal collection rate is at 100.01%, so that was great, and it's very similar to what we had last year as well at 99.8%. And we're just lucky to be in a community where residents pay in a timely fashion. It's wonderful. Also, the real and personal base grew by about 1.66%, and that's a little bit ahead of our 1.5% budget forecast. Motor vehicle tax base grew at 7.57%. You may recall last year there was a little bit of a dip in motor vehicle valuation at this time, and this is just the result of recovery from that. We're not sure why. There were a couple of down months last year, but those have just, apparently it was a timing issue. And we have rebounded from that and just normal growth on top of that. Local option sales taxes are, for the first 7 months of actual receipts, are running at 6.4% ahead of the previous year collections. And we won't know the final sales tax distribution for the year until September, because there is a little bit of a timing lag in when we receive those collections. Restricted intergovernmental revenues are a little bit below the quarterly forecast by $191,000, and that's just directly related to the FEMA, the timing of when we're going to receive the FEMA distribution. Operating expenditures were about $1.5 million below quarterly budget. This is quite a bit larger than what we expect, the expected expenditure variance of 5%. Part of it's due to lapsed salaries and benefits. That's related to certain departments, like the planning department have experienced a little bit greater turnover this year, but other departments as well. And then it also plays a role into the timing of when pay dates fall in the year. And in this case, we have 3 pay dates coming up in May, and that plays a little bit of a role in that. Aside from salaries and benefits, other operating items just have not been expended by the departments as they originally planned. But I think most large projects are expected to be completed by the end of the year. Capital outlay, about 65% of capital outlay budgeted for the first 3 quarters has been expended. The largest portion of this variance is the $165,000 that was deferred, those capital projects that were deferred in November to create this community center contingency appropriation. Those funds are still in the general fund. We haven't moved any of those over to the capital project fund as of today. A couple of other main projects too are the $80,000 for Wicker Park playground equipment. That's just the installation piece. The payment for the equipment was included in Q3. And then $70,000 for a couple of police vehicles that have since been ordered. From a financial outlook perspective, the housing market has cooled off slightly. We can see that we've issued 83 single-family residential building permits in the first 3 quarters compared to 103 the last year at the same point in time. Historically, though, we've had quite a few permit issuances in the last quarter of the year. So we project around 120. I know Natalie mentioned last week at the budget work session maybe 110, somewhere thereabouts. But overall, we will come in lower than the 144 than we received last year or issued last year, but that was expected. We anticipated there to be a little bit of a drop. Fund balance, we anticipate that it will decrease by about $3.6 million at the end of FY 2019, and that's due to the community center construction. We anticipate it to be approximately $7 million, or 30% of expenditures, which is right at the bottom of that range, and that's basically what we expected. A couple of other items to mention. Fairbarn covered 84% of their operating expenditures with revenues. This is quite a bit lower than the 102 that was achieved at the same point last year and below their balanced scorecard of 95%. Where discounts were applied, the Fairbarn covered about 100% of operating expenditures. But we really think it's just related to the competing event venues and surrounding counties that have opened and just taken some business potentially, put some pressure on our venue. Harness Track covered only 57% of operating expenditures compared to 69% last year. And the decline is just due to fewer horses stabling at the track. And it doesn't appear that they'll reach that 60% coverage ratio as originally planned. So all in all, we're very pleased with the village's financial condition and where we stand to move forward into FY 2020 and implementing the items that are planned for in that strategic operating plan document. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those for you.
Thank you, Brooke. Any questions for Brooke? She does it so well. We just don't have any questions. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Brooke.
Plus, we had the opportunity to ask questions in the budget session.
Absolutely, yes. So we have had plenty of opportunity to interact with Brooke and get her expertise. Okay, other business. Do any council members have other business to discuss? Okay, comments from attendees. Anyone present wish to comment? Yes. What's his name? I always forget. Huh? Mr. Hoffman. Okay, sure. Arranging those 21 pages of comments, are you? Oh, gosh, no. Sure.
I have distributed a copy of Chapter 9 of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance concerning off-street parking requirements and my remarks to members of the Village Council, the Village Manager, and Mr. Sinclair, the pilot. At present, the leaders of the Community Presbyterian Church continue to violate Chapter 9 of the PDO as follows. Section 9.4, off-street parking requirements on page 109. Section 9.5, landscaping requirements on page 116. Of special interest, Chapter 9.4.1.1E on page 110 states, and I quote, "All parking areas required under this section shall be completed prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the use or uses which they serve," unquote. The Community Presbyterian Church leaders have violated this provision of the PDO every week by announcing in the pilot, and I quote, "The church has new parking available near the church," unquote. This illegal parking occurs primarily on the old site of the Wee School off Fields Road. Illegal parking creep also occurs on the site of the Denisov property on Everett Road. The village staff has been informed of these parking violations, but to no apparent avail. I welcome a frank discussion of this topic by all interested parties so that a mutually beneficial bargain, readily enforceable, can be attained at this late hour to preserve what can be saved. However, a three-legged stool cannot stand on two legs. Neighborhood input is also required on a variety of subjects. For example, shared parking with the school, the village right-of-way rehab, a revitalized landscape design with proper planted buffers, and a possible reforestation program, stormwater management, and a church schedule to alleviate parking problems. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Okay, any others wish to address the council at this time? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to recess the regular meeting and enter into a closed session. The long one, who wants to do that?
I move to recess the regular meeting and enter into a closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-38.11A5I to establish or to instruct the public body, staff, or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body and negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease. Specifically, the council will discuss a potential real estate transaction.
Kevin, might I ask you to add the verbiage associated with
Sure,
session
I
number
will.
2? That's our mistake. We didn't add that to you.
In addition, pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11A3, to consult with the village attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the village attorney and the village council. Specifically, council will discuss potential litigation for the recently approved Taylortown annexation.
Second.
We have a motion by Kevin Drum and a second by John Baldry. Is there any discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you very much. We will be able to conduct our closed session in here if you all go out there. Otherwise, I hope I say that nicely. Otherwise, we have to leave. So